When it launched way back in 1998, Lexus's first SUV, the RX, introduced something completely new to the automotive landscape. It combined a little bit of respectable off-road ability with on-road manners that were more car-like than pretty much anything at the time, along with some of Lexus's stereotypical and quintessential luxury and comfort features. Now I've managed to get myself on a pretty good example of that very first RX500, and frankly I am stunned. Its 3-litre V6 engine is still really strong and sounds sweet as a nut. It's comfortable, it's got features that even by today's standards you'd want to find in a modern car. Digital display down here, electric seats, it's comfortable, it's quiet. Even after nearly a quarter of a century, this car is still incredibly impressive. Over the years though, the RX kind of lost its way a little bit, and by the 4th generation, its ride had become a little choppy, its steering a little bit numb, and dare I say it, the whole thing a little bit Toyota-y. But this is the 5th generation, and a lot has changed. There's lots to talk about with the 2023 RX, but let's start with what you don't get. The V6 is gone. You can't have a 7-seater anymore, and the 300 boot badge is also no more. But let me explain to you why none of that matters. The range in Australia will eventually grow to 4 variants, but to begin with, we'll get 3. The entry level will be the RX350. Above that, there'll be an RX350h. Above that, there'll eventually be an RX450h, but also what's new to the range is a new RX500h, this car. The entry-level version is the only non-hybrid version. That gets a 2.4-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder and permanent all-wheel drive. Above that is the first of the hybrids, the 350h. That gets a 2.5-litre naturally aspirated petrol engine and a hybrid system with the rear axle pure electric and the front axle getting Lexus's 2 electric motor system. Above that, the PHEV, I'll talk about that later because we're not getting that for a few months and it'll give me something to talk about when it arrives. As to when the RX will arrive in Australia, well that'll be early 2023. And when it does arrive, the car I'm most excited about is this one, the range topper, the RX500h. The reason I'm so excited about this is it introduces a few more firsts for Lexus. It is the first time we've seen a turbocharged engine in conjunction with its hybrid system. On the rear axle, like all the hybrids, it's pure electric, but it gets a much bigger electric motor, and critically, it gets its own converter and controller system, which means it can do different things with the rear axle. Clever stuff like when you do a full launch acceleration, instead of the rear axle squatting and upsetting the nature of the car, it provides torque to the rear axle and it can settle out that pitch and roll under hard acceleration. Same under braking, it can apply regenerative braking to the rear axle when you're hitting the brakes hard, it keeps the body all nice and stable and confidence inspiring. Now, it's the same engine that you get in the entry-level version, a 2.4-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder. But in conjunction with electric assistance, this car produces 273 kilowatts and 551 newton meters of torque. Now that is getting this car into proper performance car territory. Exactly the reason why Lexus is calling this the F-Sport Performance, another first for the brand. Fundamental to the changes of the new 5th generation RX is its platform. It's now rolling on Lexus's GAK platform, which actually is the same as Toyota's TN GAK, but they've dropped the Toyota part from its name. Now that has made a significant difference to virtually every area of this car. First of all, its weight. It's about 40 kilos lighter, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in today's day when we're obsessed with efficiency and dynamics, it has made a notable difference. Also, its size. Now that's the most deceptive part of this car because inside it feels smaller, but actually it's bigger, but not in all dimensions. It's the same height and it's the same length, but its wheelbase is longer, which means there's loads more space inside the cabin, and it's wider, particularly at the rear track, which is 65 millimeters wider. And that has imparted 2 things I like most about this car. One, its stance and its proportions. It just looks better, but also its dynamics. This car might be rolling on 21-inch rims. In fact, all of the versions I've driven today do, but just in different styles. This one gets the Michelin Pilot Sport SUV 4 tyre, but actually cruising like this, the only noise to talk about is a bit of wind noise. That engine quietens down to virtually no background noise. It's smooth, it's comfortable, just like that original RX500 that we started with. There's so many parts to this car that honour the proper Lexus mantra, but it's entered new sporty territory. And I can tell you, it does not feel its 2.1 ton curb weight. It's incredibly lively. Definitely there's never been an RX that's as good to drive as this. And at the core of all of its dynamics is that drivetrain. Now, it's got everything you want in a hybrid. Instant torque from the electric assistance, and then that lovely 2.4 litre turbo 4-cylinder comes in with loads of turbo grunt. I'm so pleased that Lexus is finally embracing turbocharged engines, because for years they resisted the whole notion. But this car is absolutely made by its combination of beefy rear electric motor, another motor on the front axle, and a proper automatic transmission. That brings me to my final first for this car. It's gone for a conventional automatic. Previously, Lexus hybrids have gone for a transmission solution that feels in its operation like a CVT. But this gets a proper automatic transmission, and it means I can play with the gears. I've got paddle shifters. It's really smooth in its operation, but when you get stuck into it, it's urgent and aggressive with its gear changes. This car feels absolutely like a performance SUV. For once, this car is now competing in some of those other premium brands with their premium players and the high performance players. I'm looking at BMW, Mercedes and Audi, of course. Performance in this version, and all versions actually, is pretty respectable, but this one is the hero of the show. And while we're talking about the flagship, you can have this version with rear wheel steering, which makes a huge difference to its maneuverability around town. But then when you're out on cruising roads like this, it has a sort of surety to its footing and its stance when you try and change lanes quickly. That's because the rear wheels turn in the same direction as the front wheels when you're at speed, but at lower speeds they turn in the opposite direction, effectively shortening its wheelbase. Common to all the variants are lots of typical Lexus luxury touches, including this massive 14-inch screen. Actually, the entry-level version, if you don't spec anything with options, gets a 9.8-inch screen, but the best thing is you get the same amount of features and options and apps inside it. It's just a bigger screen. Some of the equipment in here is absolutely standout. Almost full digital instrument cluster. You've got the two more traditional fuel and temperature gauges either side, but we've gone full digital in the middle. The sport seats. Lexus does a wonderful seat, and I think they get absolutely to their pinnacle when you get into the sports interior like this car has. Loads of adjustment, ergonomics are fantastic, visibility all around is great. I've got a digital rear view mirror, I've got head-up display with full color, and it's massive. Loads more features. I've got down here 3 USB-C charging ports and 1 traditional USB-A. Wireless charging for devices. And why it is important to have wireless charging is because this car now gets Apple CarPlay and Android Auto wirelessly. So more good features there. But the one thing I can't really talk to you about at the moment is pricing. Lexus Australia says this car is still too far away to start talking about exactly how much it will cost on the showroom floor. The reason that's so critical is because the two entry-level variants are probably very closely matched. The entry-level 350 gets a turbocharged petrol, which is expensive. It's bolted to an all-wheel drive system, which is more expensive. But then the entry-level hybrid gets a battery under its boot, an electric motor, expensive. I can see those two cars being very closely matched. But the good news is I've driven all of them today in lovely sunny California, and I can say there is no dunger in the range. There's no entry-level version that you'd find difficult to recommend to anyone. It's been great to meet the new Lexus RX range out here in the beautiful Californian sunshine. It's a really strong performer with excellent powertrains across the board, much better dynamics than I've ever realized in an RX, and heaps more technology and luxury features you'd expect from Lexus. But the thing I've liked about it so much is it's never more represented and honored that soul and spirit of the very first RX500 I started with. But to begin with, driver inattention detected. USB-C contemporary charging ports. What have I got? Yes. Yes, that time. I'll give you that. I definitely wasn't paying attention.